Rev up your engines! Today we're going to have some fun. Probably the most annoying problem that we all get at some point in time, a vehicle that randomly dies. Now it might do it once a month. So first we'll put on our thinking caps. Now it's great because he's the original owner. He knows it hasn't been any wrecks or floods. So we don't have to worry about some crazy thing where the computer got wet, now a circuit's gone. No, it's all bone stock, hasn't been wrecked or flooded. It will just randomly die, generally when he's coming to a stop or when he's idling. This thing is kind of low mileage for its age when you think about it. It's 11 years old and it's only got 113,000 miles on it. So let's start it and listen to it. Sounds good from here. These V6 engines are generally hardy, especially with these 4 liters. It's not shaking, it doesn't smell, it's not leaking oil. And I asked him, does it burn oil? He says, no, not between oil changes. It's not losing any coolant. Out with the giant computer. That's the only way we're going to figure this thing out. You can't hide from the data. So we'll plug it in. It knows what it is right away. All right, we start looking through everything. Everything's pretty normal. Even as the fuel temperature on this thing. Ignition timing, look, it's staying around 10, 11. That's normal. Bank 1 and bank 2 injector pulses, you can see they're pretty close. 2.58, 2.6, 2.54, 2.56. And they keep changing a little bit here and there. So there's nothing wrong from one bank to the other. They're never going to run perfectly with this kind of mileage in this age. But when you're only off a hundredth of a millisecond, I mean, it doesn't really make all that much difference. So we'll trudge on to more data. And the mass airflow sensor, that's working pretty good. It's a 4-liter engine, it's staying around 4 grams per second. Plus or minus 0.2 is perfectly acceptable, and this one's almost spot on, so that's working fine. Well, really, there's no bad data as it stands now. So guess what? It's time for a road test. Road trip time, here we go. Record, it's on it. So I'll do a good road test while the machine records everything. And we'll see if anything looks odd, and we'll pray like mad that it conks out, although it might not. So what we're hoping for is when we stop, it starts vibrating, because he says it's his wife's car, and she says it'll start vibrating and shaking and then conk out. So let's hope it starts vibrating and shaking. Kind of the opposite of what you normally want to happen in a car. And then again, I'm in the car, and machines are afraid of me, so it might not do anything bad. Step on the gas. Hey, this old truck still got a lot of oomph to it. And even though I don't like Nissan transmissions, this is a rear-wheel drive transmission. Look, step on it. It downshifts, take your foot off. It upshifts, it still works perfectly fine. The stupid thing is just dying every once in a while. Good, it's shaking, it's shaking, it's shaking. All right, we're gonna turn the recording off and we'll save it. Now we're gonna record again in case something else happens. And the reason I'm doing this is my first recording, I know at the very end it was rumbling. So I know exactly when it rumbled so I can check all the data. Now I'm gonna play back the end and we're gonna watch stuff. We'll watch the injector pulse, see if anything odd happens to it. When it gets to the end, it starts rumbling. They're both kind of following each other like they should as the idle changes. No, it's staying stable. I'm doing a combined graph of injector pulse, ignition timing, and when we get to the end, we'll see if anything weird is happening. Especially when we get to the end and it's just idling. We'll watch it when it started to shake. Now, when it was shaking, you'll see the injector pulses were close together here. That's these here. When it started shaking, the ignition timing changed. And the ignition timing changed just when it started shaking. So that's kind of a clue. That's the only odd thing. It's not the fuel injectors, but the ignition. We were just idling. The ignition timing should stay stable. All of a sudden it took a drop. As you can see here, it took a drop, then it went up, and then it came down. It should be stable while it's idling, and it's not. So there's something going on there. Now we're going to compare ignition timing, low speed cut, and mass airflow sensor. And we'll watch it at the end. So with all our data, let's check out the throttle position sensor 1, throttle position sensor 2, and the throttle stick control. And we'll do a combination graph. We'll go to the end where it acted up. The throttle sensor is working correctly, staying flat because it's idling. It should give the same data. While the timing's messing around, if the throttle did a jump, then you know it's giving the wrong information to the computer and it's saying the throttle's open when it's supposed to be closed, and that would stall it out because you'd have an open throttle at an idle and it would stall it out. But that's not the case. So let's look under the hood. Now this is a modern Nissan. It's got variable valve timing and it has a timing chain, but not just any timing chain. Now as you can see in this picture, not only does it have a gigantic timing chain, the cams have their own separate timing chains that connect to the original big timing chain. So there's actually 3 of them. We can see when it did act up, the timing was jumped. It should remain stable. Well, now, we're getting into astrophysics here. This thing's got 3 separate timing chains. None of the sensors show that they have a problem, but for some reason, when it's idling every once in a while, the timing jumps. Who could tell which one? Now, if some guy was going to rebuild the engine, they'd just say to heck with it. They'd just replace everything. They'd replace the main chain. They'd replace the side chains. But it's $300 odd for the parts, but it's like $1,300 labor to replace those chains. But the thing runs good enough. We're going to see if we can do something about that. Now, luckily, while we were road testing this thing, it's got some codes for the BCM. Oh, useless! It's telling us that there's low tire pressure. Low tire pressure, low tire pressure. Those are all tire pressure codes. Nothing to do with a car conking out. They just wear out. The batteries go out in the tire pressure sensors. Who cares about that? So we're going to go into the computer, ECM system, and let's see what we can do. We'll start with special functions. Well, you never know. We'll try his closed throttle position learned. Ignition on and engine stopped. Yes, we'll start it. Completed. Not only happens when you come to a stop, right? This now knows where the throttle is when it's closed. It's reset. Sometimes though, Dad'll get off. If it doesn't stall again, he's going to be a lucky man. And while we're at it, we'll do a idle air volume learn. And we'll check the target ignition timing adjustment. All right, we can see, of course, it's not acting up now. We're idling and it's 15 and it's not bouncing all over the place, right? You can feel a little bit of shaking. As you can see by the less shaking, people always tell you, modern cars are all run by computers. You can't set the idle with a screwdriver anymore. No, but you can set it with one of these. Realize that today, with these machines, there's a lot of stuff that can be done. I know the guys at the dealers always say, oh, there's nothing wrong. Oh, we can't adjust that, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, they can. They just don't want to, or they wait till you're gone. And like the guy that came here with the Dodge a few weeks ago, and they wanted $3,800 to $6,000 to rebuild or replace his engine, and all I did with this machine was reset stuff, and then he went on his merry way. Guess what? He says it's still running fine after I reset it. He says, thanks for saving me a few $1,000. Because his was kind of like this case. They told him, oh, you need an engine, blah, 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 blah. His thing went 110 miles an hour on the highway, no problems. This thing runs fine on the highway, no problems too. At least this guy's smart. He didn't go to the dealer and say, hey, what's wrong with my car? Now, time is going to tell, but there's a TSB for these things, timing chain tensioner, that's made out of plastic. Of course, the plastic erodes. Duh, there's a smart one. Have a metal chain right on a plastic tensioner, right? Oh, the plastic's not going to wear out, right? If that's the case, since it runs so good at high speeds, me resetting this stuff, that little bit of resetting can compensate, because if your timing is off a tad when you're idling, especially when you come to a stop, because then it goes from a higher timing to a lower timing. You need perfection at idle. It can stall. Where at highway speeds, it isn't going to affect anything. The engine's running fine going down the road. You take your foot off the gas on the highway, the engine's still going 3,000 RPM, so it's not going to stall out then. It's only when it dips down. Maybe this will fix it. We'll find out over time. Could compensate for the worn timing chain. But even if it was a timing chain that was worn, I can tell this one isn't really bad because it's not clacking. When a chain is really bad, it's so loose it makes noise. This thing does not make timing chain noise yet. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Juan says, I got an 08 5.3 liter Silverado, 140,000 miles. I feel a grinding noise from my feet at 20 to 40 when I accelerate and decelerate. I have a feeling my transmission's starting to wear out. Probably. I do have to say, you got 140,000 miles. That's about the limit of the transmission of one of those things. If it's still got the original transmission, I can just about guarantee you that it's wearing out from those noises. But cross your fingers, go under there. Check the drive shaft. You can jack it up in the air, vehicle in neutral. Then grab the drive shaft and pray when you try to twist it, it goes clunk, clunk, and you'll see the U-joints are worn. Maybe it's just the U-joints. Pray it's just the U-joints. They don't cost that much, you know? 20, 30 bucks a piece. You can learn how to do it or pay a mechanic to put new U-joints on. Pray it's that, but from my experience, it's usually the transmission. That's as long as those things generally last anymore. 2,840,000 miles. All my customers with those, they're either on their second or third transmission. If they keep them and they want to keep driving them, they'll put a remanufactured transmission. It usually comes with a year or two warranty. It's a lot cheaper than buying a new truck. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.